What's up, Fisher people? I'm gonna change my oil, and I'm gonna show you how I change my oil. A person that sucks at maintenance stuff. I'm not a mechanic, not even close. But I know how to get the job done, and I'm gonna show you how I do it. Maybe there's some things that I do that might show you how to make things easier, quicker. I don't know. Maybe I'm gonna suck at it. Maybe you're gonna tell me I'm doing something wrong. I'd appreciate the feedback too. That's always helpful. But the first and most important thing, since maintenance work does suck, get yourself some nice comfy sweatpants. You might as well be comfortable.
Oh, and there's also some other mildly important things that you probably need as well. Your oil for one thing, the 10W30 oil, 7 quarts. You're gonna need a pump for the Gearcase lube. And it's gonna have to have the right adapters depending on whether you're using the kicker or the big motor. You're gonna need an oil filter, of course, too. You're gonna want a funnel to help get some of that oil in there. You're gonna need some kind of an oil wrench, oil filter wrench or something of the like to assist with removing that. You're going to need a variety of sockets and socket wrenches to get both your prop lock nut off as well as the fill screws in the gear case, the lower unit. And you're going to, of course, want a drip pan.
Then according to the book, you're supposed to trim the motor up to let the oil drain out of the sump, as they call it. As you can see, I've already done that. Then of course you need to remove the cowling or the casing or the helmet. I'm trying to do this in layman's terms because that's how I think too. As you can see, I've already done that as well. And I don't know if this is the appropriate order to do things, but I usually take the oil filter out first before I actually drain the oil. I was told that's okay, maybe even preferred. So that's what I'm gonna do first. And there is a little oil drain plug. There is a little oil drain hose that's supposed to be there. Mine fell off, unfortunately. I've never seen any oil come out of it when I pull the filter. It's just supposed to be like if you pull the filter and there's a lot of oil in the filter, it's supposed to drain out that hose so it doesn't get all over stuff. But I've never had it happen. We'll see if it happens this time. I don't know. So if you don't care about that, then you just go ahead and remove the filter with an oil wrench. You gotta turn it counterclockwise. It might be a little tight. Probably is gonna be a little tight. And in case some oil does drain, I'm just gonna use a little rag here to put under that spout where the hose used to be, which I don't have anymore. Once you get that sucker off, then you gotta put the new one on. Just take the new one out of the box, you apply a little bit of your new oil onto the gasket, which is a little rubbery thing on the outside, so that's not so sticky next time. So if you lube it up good the first time, the next time it's easier to take off. Like it was pretty easy to take off this time. Then you spin that thing in there clockwise this time, obviously. And once you get it to where it makes contact and it's a little tight, you do another 3/4 of a turn, which I can usually do by my hand. I don't need the wrench for that anymore because I'm super freaking strong. Now that you got that filter on there, if you don't have somewhere to remember when you did it, you might want to write it on there with a Sharpie or something, the date that you change it. I usually keep track of that in my phone. Do what you want to do. But it's time to drain the oil out of the motor now. So in order to drain things, the first thing you gotta do is you gotta then trim the motor down so the stuff can drain. And then you gotta open up the drain valve, the oil drain valve, is that what it's called? It's a valve of some kind. That's how the oil comes out. The oil could just spill out of that thing, but what I've done, like they recommend in the book, is I get this piece of hose and I connect the hose to the valve and route the hose into my drain pan so that it's a little cleaner. And pro tip, if you cut the hose to the right length so it just reaches your drain pan, it'll drain faster. Whereas when I first did it, I had a really long piece of hose and it still gets out, but it takes a little while longer. So if you cut it right, it helps save you some time. The other thing you can do is you can drain, assuming you should do your lower unit grease at the same time. Grease, oil, lubricant, whatever you want to call it. It's got a lot of different terms. It doesn't really look like grease when you look at the bottle, but you could drain both of these at the same time if you have 2 different drain pans. Save you some time because it takes sometimes a good hour for all that stuff to drain. For the purposes of this video, I'm not going to do that, but that's another time-saving tip. You can drain both at the same time. 2 birds, 1 stone. Anyway, once you get the hose on that thing, you loosen that thing up until the oil starts draining, but you don't want to loosen it more than 2.5 turns because you could damage the seal. So as long as the oil starts draining a little bit, you're good. Don't go over 2.5.
You hear it drain? Do you hear it?
And then once it's done draining, you can obviously remove this hose and then you can tighten that valve, and you're supposed to do it hand tight and then a quarter of a turn if you don't have a torque wrench. If you have a torque wrench, it's 17.5 pounds per foot. I don't have a torque wrench, I don't do that. Then once you got all the oil drained, it's time to fill the oil up. 7 quarts. So what I did is I got a gallon and I got 3 quarts. You could save some money by getting 2 gallons and measuring it out. I'm lazy, didn't decide to do that. It would have saved me like 15 bucks or something, I don't know. But you gotta have a funnel. You got your oil thing up top. It's like a little yellow cap in mine. It's probably a yellow cap in yours, I don't know. It's right next to the dipstick. You open that up, put your funnel in there, dump your oil in slowly so it doesn't spill. Make sure it all goes into the motor. Then you've changed your oil and it's time to move on to the lower unit grease, which is also called lube. It doesn't look like grease. It also stinks really bad. If you've never smelled it, kind of reeks. You're gonna have to deal with that. All right, so for the lower unit, the first thing you gotta do is you're gonna have to take the prop off. And that's gonna require, for my prop, and if you have the same motor, a 1 1/16 fairly deep socket to get the main lock nut off. And then when you look in there, there's gonna be 2 screws. The top screw is the vent hole, the bottom screw is the fill screw. And when you pull both of those off, it's gonna start to drain the existing Gearcase lube. So you obviously wanna have a pan underneath. You want it trimmed down as far as you can. You gotta be able to still get a pan under there. And that's gonna take another 70 million hours or whatever to get that, probably an hour and a half, something like that. And then when it stops dripping and you know that it's all out, then you can start filling it. So as you're pumping this stuff up, you pump with a pump, and this pump has a couple different adapters for the kicker and for the regular motor, and then it's also got an extension piece so that it gets all the lube out of the bottom of the bottle. So you're gonna attach that, screw it into the bottom screw, which is the fill screw, the fill hole, whatever, and then pump that sucker up, and it takes a little while, takes a little elbow grease, pun intended, and then eventually you'll see it ooze out of the top hole, and that's when you know you've got enough. And when you have, you want to put that top screw in as quickly as possible to prevent any more leaking. Screw that hand tight, remove your pump, screw the other one hand tight, and then you're going to crank them tighter with your wrench or socket or whatever else it is you got. And what I do to tighten those things, again, hand tight, and then use the socket or whatever and turn it just a little bit just to snug it up. Don't over tighten it. I don't know exactly the pounds per foot on this one. Again, I don't have a torque wrench, I don't use that stuff. But then you put your prop back on, tighten things up, and you should be ready to go. After a while, you might want to check your oil levels to make sure that you got the right amount in there. You might want to grease up the rod for your prop with some marine grease while you got the prop off. Checking for some line if you got some line in there. Make sure you clean stuff out while the prop's off. Might as well get that done. And then you should be ready to go. You should be ready to go fish again. So that's how I change my oil. That's how I describe it. Again, I'm not a mechanic, kind of suck at this stuff, but there's a few things that I can do, which saves me a little bit of money to not have to take it into a shop. Maybe it'll be the same for you. Thanks for watching. Hit the like button, maybe subscribe to the channel. Think about supporting further on Patreon. And until next time, hopefully next time we're catching fish instead of changing oil.
Beautiful fish, look at that thing.
Stay cool.